Okay, so when most people hear the word economics, they instantly picture, boring stock tickers or endless spreadsheets. But if you peel back the math, what you're really looking at is a blueprint. Economics is actually the invisible architecture governing absolutely every choice you, your community, and your government make. So today we're going to break down the foundational structures of that architecture to give you a much sharper analytical lens on how the world actually works.
Here's our blueprint for today's explainer. First, the problem of infinite wants. Second, defining the economic game. Third, the machinery of production. Fourth, three big economic questions. And finally, the architecture of choice.
All right, let's kick things off with part one, the problem of infinite wants. And that core problem, it's scarcity. Now let's be super clear here. Scarcity isn't just some empty corporate jargon. It is literally the ultimate, inescapable law of nature. It's the permanent baseline constraint of our reality, because finite resources just cannot magically meet our infinite human desires. Humanity is fundamentally forced to prioritize.
The math of this dilemma is totally uncompromising. Imagine a giant scale. On one side, you have a towering, constantly growing pile of infinite human wants: houses, cars, gadgets, clothing. And on the other side are finite earthly resources: wood, oil, wheat. Wants strictly outweigh resources. That imbalance right there is scarcity. And the entire study of how we navigate that imbalance is what we call economics.
Moving right along to section 2, defining the economic game. We really need to clear up a super common misconception right off the bat. Scarcity and shortage are not the same thing. Scarcity is a permanent law of nature. A shortage, on the other hand, is just a temporary market glitch where demand exceeds supply at a certain price. So basically, economics manages permanent scarcity using prices to fix temporary shortages.
Economics doesn't actually study everything we do. When categorizing human activities, economics exclusively cares about the ones driven by optimization, income, and exchange. The other stuff, activities done out of love, duty, or affection, they are obviously vital to humanity, but they sit entirely outside our economic game board.
Even within those strict boundaries, economists essentially swap between two very different hats. First, you have positive economics. Think of this as the objective scientist dealing with cold hard facts. Saying inflation is at 5% is a positive, totally verifiable statement. Then you have normative economics. This is the subjective policymaker dealing in ethics and opinions. Saying inflation should be lower is a normative value judgment. Knowing which hat someone is wearing is definitely going to save you a lot of headaches, especially during election season.
We also look at this whole game through two distinct lenses. Microeconomics zooms all the way into the individual units, using supply and demand to price a single commodity. Macroeconomics, however, pulls the camera all the way back to look at the aggregates. We're talking national output, total employment, and the overall health of the entire country.
All right, section 3, the machinery of production.
So, before any actual societal production could even get off the ground, you need raw inputs. We call these the factors of production, and there are exactly 4 of them. Land, which means all natural resources; labor, representing human effort; capital, which actually isn't just money, but the physical tools and machinery used to build things; and finally, enterprise, the entrepreneur who takes the risk to combine the other 3. Without all 4 of these, the machine simply doesn't turn on.
When those 4 raw inputs flow directly into the production process, society basically creates 2 types of outputs out the other side. One path yields consumer goods, things for you and me, like smartphones and food. The other path yields capital goods. These are the products businesses used to make other goods, like factory robotics or smelting plants.
And the crazy thing? This machine never stops. Production creates goods, generating exchange through wages and profits. That money gets distributed right back to households and businesses, funding consumption. But consuming those goods naturally demands even more production. It is the perpetual beating heart of economic life.
Which brings us to section 4, 3 big economic questions.
Because we live in a world of scarcity, literally every economy has to answer 3 huge allocation questions: what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. These are the load-bearing pillars of any society, no matter how rich or poor.
So, I've got to ask you, when you only have a finite amount of steel, electricity, and human brainpower, what exactly should you build? And how should you go about building it? Think of these decisions like massive societal sliders. On the what slider, a society must choose between producing consumer goods or war goods. Sliding toward one deliberately, mathematically, sacrifices the other. On the how slider, do you use labor-intensive techniques, meaning high human effort, or capital-intensive techniques using heavy machinery? The ultimate goal for any society is maximum output at the absolute minimum cost.
But once you've figured out what to make and how to make it, you slam right into the final and honestly most complex architectural question of all. For whom do we produce? Who actually gets to enjoy the outputs of this massive machine?
Well, the answer is mathematically straightforward. Goods are produced for those with paying capacity, and your paying capacity relies on your income, which relies entirely on your contribution to those 4 factors of production we talked about. Landowners get rent, laborers get wages, capital providers get interest, entrepreneurs get profit. The whole for whom problem is ultimately just a giant debate over how to slice up this national income pie.
And finally, Section 5, the architecture of choice. Listen, if you take absolutely nothing else away from this explainer today, please remember this one thing. Every single choice carries a measurable cost. Because resources are finite, choosing to do one thing means you are mathematically choosing not to do something else.
Economists have a fancy term for this: opportunity cost. It's the value of the next best alternative you sacrificed. Take the micro level, for example. If someone turns down a 35,000 rupee journalist job to stay at their current bank job, their opportunity cost is explicitly that 35,000 rupees. Now zoom out to the macro level. By choosing to heavily subsidize a wind farm, the opportunity cost is the specific healthcare improvements a government had to abandon to pay for it. The laws of scarcity literally spare no one.
And that brings us to the ultimate blueprint of our limits, the Production Possibility Frontier, or PPF for short. This curve proves that getting more of one thing mathematically demands sacrificing another. If an economy is producing 10 units of cotton, deciding we want just 1 unit of corn forces us further down the curve. Cotton drops to 9. We sacrificed 1 unit. That right there is the opportunity cost. Scarcity dictates you simply cannot go beyond this curve, and every single point on it forces a trade-off.
Because, this isn't just some abstract theory from massive governments or mega corporations. This is the framework of human life. Your time, your energy, your attention, they are all incredibly scarce resources. So if every choice has a measurable cost, I want to leave you with this. What is the exact opportunity cost of the very next choice you make today? Really think about it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the architecture around you.